Welcome to Carrying Stones and Digging Holes to Cultivate Consciousness, where, for the next 2 hours, Bridgette Lynn Dolgoff and Kelsey Sweet will be sharing their knowledge and understanding with their own beautifully unique twists on all topics related to helping humanity to achieve betterment of health in body and in mind. Settle yourselves down on this fine Saturday evening. For now, it is time for Bridgette and Kelsey.
All right, everybody. Hey, it is Saturday in Studio B, Revolution Radio, and it is Kelsey and my show. Yeah, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but for us, it's 5 p.m. here on the West Coast. And yeah, so that's it. So Kelsey is on remote.
I'm way out here.
Yeah, she's way out there. So in so many ways. So anyway, so hey, we are 100% listeners supported. All of us here at Revolution Radio, we volunteer all the time, even our management. Usually most of them work other full-time jobs, and they're taking care of all of the business that has to do with Revolution Radio. And I just want to say personally, you know, like, I'm really grateful being on Revolution Radio has helped me to kind of strengthen, you know, kind of my people skills, and just being able to do radio is it takes a while to get something like that under your butt and your belt. So I was really glad that I've had the opportunity to, especially to be on radio. I've had TV and radio shows where I was told, you know, what to do, how to do it, what kind of guests I was going to have, that I wouldn't actually have access to my own content, you know, and things of that kind of nature. So Revolution Radio has never, ever, ever dictated what I can do, what I can say, what I can bring about, who I am. And I appreciate that because it's a rarity. We have 90 hosts plus management. Some of our management have hosts or shows. So that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot to contain voluntarily. You know, like, this is what we do in a volunteer form. So everyone on Revolutionary Radio, excuse me, on Revolution Radio, nobody gets paid. And so we just ask you to help keep our lights on. So you can go to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. We have a donate button with a page. You can click on that. So many different ways that you can help us. And also don't forget to go to our shop, and you could pick up like one of your favorite host mugs or show mugs, or, you know, find a shirt with, you know, different types of Revolution Radio artwork. And yeah, and also if you want to know more about what Kelsey Sweet is doing, you can go to her website, kelseysweet.com, and my website is COE. Oh, I heard a goodbye. I think we're still on though. I think so. Yeah, because it's still going. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're still on. Duty. No,
Find out.
Yeah. But something definitely went off. Okay, so if it was Studio B that went off, then it would have been gone, and I would have had to bring it back up. So I think it was something else. Not sure exactly what that something else was, but we will just kind of ride with it here. And unless somebody lets me know that things are not good in paradise, then, you know, I'll do something about it. All right. So also my website, coe-llc.com. and Bridgette Dolgoff. And I put up blogs about different stuff. And also there's a page there about our radio show, and bios about Kelsey and myself, and then contact links. So you can find some stuff there as well. So all good. I had a little bit of
You've
420
got
before
some
the
great
show.
stuff on. Oh, I was
What?
gonna say you've got some good stuff on YouTube too. Your YouTube channel is
Yeah.
definitely worth checking out.
And that's also where a lot of the I edit the shows and I put them up there. Those are after the records. So if people want to go there, they can go there too. And I think that's about it for the opening, except for I have one thing. Excuse me. I'm doing a lot of emotional work. Well, you probably understand that. Whenever you're going to school for long periods of time, you have to adapt and change, and you have to let go of resistance, and you have to kind of open yourself more up, especially in the type of work that I do. So I have a lot of throat chakra clearing today, and I got a really good praise today from a cardiac MD, who is
Ooh.
also a herbalist, who was one of the teachers on people giving the lectures. So we talked about herbal medicine and cardiology and neurology and things of that nature. So, but he basically said that I was a Van Gogh. I was an anomaly
That's
because of,
awesome.
yeah. So and he's like, I want your email so I can contact you or whatever else. And I'm like, great. So that really kind of, I think, is clearing my throat chakra. It's nice to, you pull yourself along, and you don't really look up very often, because you got to just keep on going to meet your goals. And so, being able to like look up and be like, I hit a gold post, that's monstrous for me. It's gigantic. So I'm having a lot of
The validation too. Yeah.
yeah.
Validation from the right person can lift you so high.
Well, yeah, and super, I've been taking in my herbal medicine fellowship, my medical herbal fellowship. I've had some incredible teachers and speakers. Oh my gosh. I mean, people that I can actually look up to, because you know how I have a thing with MDs. I hate doctors. I hate them all. And so for me to actually start falling in love with, teachers that are MDs and highly respect them, is a big deal also for me. So, but yeah, so just highly respect people that can, step out into the herbal medicine field and include that, into their medical professions. It's like a huge thing once they understand it and get it. I highly respect them for doing it, because they're out on a ledge more so than anybody else. They're out on the high wire. So, but yeah. So anyway, I have
It's a bit of a rim.
so I have this quote that I heard. So on my last applied anthroposophy class, which was Thursday. So I had 4 lectures, all day school, and then I had my last anthroposophy class, which was intense. And all these people online were crying. It was like so emotional. But there was this little poem, super small poem by Rudolf Steiner. It says, "Behold the plant, it is the butterfly, fettered by the earth. Behold the butterfly, it is the plant, freed by the cosmos." Anyway, I just fell in love with that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was just the class, we did the butterfly hatching and, the whole, you know, idea of it and who we are and, where do we go from here? How does this going to apply in our lives, and a lot of other stuff. So it was just kind of a really intense class, especially I've been in that class since like September 1st, every week, every Thursday till till Thursday. So it was a pretty intense, doing that social biography, living art, and it's how you are living every day with the outside world and how it's living with you, your reflection onto it, how it reflects back, and just working through, like, I think there are just some parts of it that I just didn't really vibrate with 100%, but what I did vibrate with, really, I think I went through some huge change this year, just on like a lot of different levels. But anyway, so what has your week been like?
Uh,
Ugh.
I feel like, well, like a lot of things have gotten done this week, or like just some big things, which is cool, and it's freed up a lot of like time space in my head, so that's cool. Like I don't have a lot of I don't have like a couple of big looming responsibilities over my head, so it was really nice to get those things completed this week. And I don't know, I always feel like I get kind of funny this time of year because it's almost my birthday. My birthday's coming up. And I don't know. I'm having fun, I guess. And I'm in Hawthorne right now, Hawthorne, Nevada, which is little teeny tiny little military town out in the middle of the desert, Nevada. For some family stuff, and it's just interesting, and it's just, well, it's nice just to be and to get to slow down and get to spend some time with my dad and my stepmom, and it's cool because I got to see a couple of my stepsisters today. I don't get to see them very often, and so it's just neat to connect. And I think there's just been a lot of, like what you've been talking about too, there's just been a lot of growth in the last year, almost 2 years. Well, I've been doing radio now for almost 2 years, and got into it through meditations on throat chakra stuff and communication. And so I've just been feeling like I can communicate a lot more, or just getting more in line with feeling more open. I think that's maybe what I'm like feeling with you too, and like your girls, just more openness, and letting some of the guard from the heavy experiences, letting some of that go. It's nice. It's just nice to feel like things are moving forward. And so, yeah, getting out into nature for my birthday is usually what I do. So getting some opportunity this weekend, just be in nature is cool. It's been raining all day. I got to drive through a big rainstorm and see some giant, awesome lightning strikes right over Lahontan, just kind of eerie and spooky, and I'm just taking it all in. So yeah, lots of rain today.
Yep, lots of rain. Well, good. I mean,
Rain in
I
the
think,
desert.
yeah, no, rain in the desert's a special thing. That
It's amazing. Yeah, beautiful in the desert in the spring with the water and the clouds and smells.
Well, I always tell everybody, whenever I have that moment where people, when you have to do any kind of inner work and something comes up about smell, and people, will have you go back to a smell memory, it's always of a smell of the desert. And when the rain first starts to come down, especially here, and there's this smell, this incredible, for people who haven't actually smelt what that smells like, it's this incredible aromatherapeutic smell. And there's just no, I don't know too many smells for me that compare to it. So it's a good thing.
It's almost metallic. Yeah, it's like a dusty, sagey, metallic-y, rainy kind of
Yeah, it's good. I was just sitting here trying to think. So my classes were, huge amount of information. Just I'm still kind of, going through a lot of it. But I was trying to think where that information went. But so there was kind of some interesting stuff that was said in my last couple classes that I had that I wanted to tell people about on radio. But one of the medical doctor, maybe it was this morning lecture, this class this morning, where he was talking about that. I just want to phrase this kind of right because I don't want to have a lot of hate mail. So there's yeah.
Well,
So
no. You don't answer.
yeah, don't answer. Okay, so the way that he put it was that there are medical doctors that have been kind of quietly, not so publicly, have been looking at a lot of the COVID data and are starting to realize that some of the blockers, that they use for cardiac patients, and what they do is they block certain receptors, and some of them block lung receptors, and it kind of can make lungs go hypersteroid, because once it starts to block the lungs and block some of these receptors in the body, then the lungs will actually kind of go push up and start creating more of these receptors, right? So he was saying that, because he's a cardiac doctor, but he was saying that these blockers, cardiac blockers, may be one of the top, if not the top, contributors for COVID death. Because the more receptors you have, the more outside things can get into them. There's more places for it to plug in. So if you have these blockers and they're creating, blocking receptors, but also which causes increase in receptors, like in the lungs, there'll be a lot more receptors for the whatever it is. Like, I don't even really like to call it COVID or whatever else, but whatever it is, I think whatever it is, it's something that's triggering autoimmune system disease, and then people are haphazardly dying from it. But because of things like this, because of Western medicine and these types of drugs that are putting people into a situation where they have, more autoimmune system responses. And everybody, the thing is that, so this is why so many people that, may have also, been listed, which, I have another whole thought about all of that, which is that, a lot of death certificates were altered, right? So we don't really know, but probably more so than not, something virally that got into the body could have contributed to the autoimmune system takedown of each individual person, which would have made it something different for each person. But it was kind of an interesting thing to hear about, these blockers. I mean, and if that's true, if that is true, or that does come out to be true, then, that puts a lot of those cardiac doctors into, a place that they, may not, be in trouble for murder, but were an accessory. Right? And then what if what if, there are some, viral agents and stuff like that that are, being released out into our environment, and those people who have like, the worst systems or have, are high risk to take that kind of stuff and are on special medications which help it to in several ways mutate and take down an autoimmune system. So anyway, it was like just kind of a trip, you know, to listen to,
Well, it
because
makes a lot of sense.
because people don't need those blockers. There are so many like alternative herbs that can pretty much help with everything that's cardiac. I mean, anything,
No,
even more
yeah.
drugs.
The blockers are weird too, because they use blockers and like neuroleptics, so like antidepressants and things like that, like psychotropic medication. And what I know of those is they're like anything since like we have natural receptors that are like little keyholes, and they have specific shapes, and then we make these synthetic things that fit into the keyholes but not perfectly so. And so if we're putting all the synthetic substances into these keyholes that aren't fitting right, or that are locking them right, or jamming them up, or just messing with the lock system, like locking keys, and the body is not going to be making the things anymore that it should be making to fit into the keyholes, or when it tries to start making the things to fit back in the keyholes, like it just goes haywire, like it doesn't know what to do, like get back into the balance. So it makes perfect sense. And it's such like a long-term, like slow and steady sort of a thing that it's not something that would be easily correlated with anything right off the bat. So you get a lot of long-term effects that would start, well, I guess we'll see it in the next couple of years with what kind of results will pop off from the locks being messed up. But yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
so this why the heart will work differently than the brain.
Yeah, no, we talked about that. We talked about the neurological, what did he call it? They had a word, neuro immunity or something like that. But we talked about like neuro, his last class was on that. It was on the neurological consequences of, and how it plays into the autoimmune system disease in the body. And we talked about the different chemicals, that the brain needs to produce. There's a really good story. So this particular doctor, he also, who did 5 lectures today, from cardiac all the way through autoimmune system disease, and then back up into the neurological area. So he was actually correlating emotional stuff and physical stuff, and all these other things that make these determinations. But he also travels to different countries, kind of one of those, I don't think it's Doctors Without Borders or anything like that, but something like that. So he travels to other countries when he gets asked to either do data collection and do scientific paper writing, for those particular places that they go, taking that, or sometimes he's doing treatment and whatever else. But he had I think the one thing that stood out from the whole neurological talk, and just herbs that we can use to balance it out, because if we can't fix the brain, then we're not going to be able to fix the immune system in some cases, because if it's producing like the wrong chemicals, the people are always going to have some kind of autoimmune disorders. They're going to be affecting everything. But he was talking about this study that he had to go do. So he got hired to do the actual data collection and the paper writing for this particular study. And he said it was like in Israel, and it was kind of on, I think, long-term conflict, war, conflict and stuff. And he one day went over to the Palestinian side to look at some people over there to collect data on about what the Palestinians are going through. And they wanted him to go and talk to this particular teenage kid because they were really worried about him either killing somebody or being suicidal. And he, through talking to the boy, they were able to actually get him help. But what they found, when the brain had so much inflammation from emotional distress, and this is this whole war thing going on, right? Constant. That the emotional stuff caused inflammation in the brain. That's what he said. And so when they looked at it all, the only way to clear it out was to get rid of all the inflammatory inflameness of the brain. And he's the first doctor that I've actually talked to about like that whole emotional imprint, because I'm all about that. So it was really good to like hear the story about how, in order to get him healthy, that they just, had to get him on a diet. They had to get him on some different herbs that could actually help with bringing down the swelling and the inflammation of the brain from all of the stress, the emotional stress, so that he could actually, go on to live like a totally normal life and not have those, more harsh characteristics, right? And so it was a really interesting, talk about how, emotions cause us to have autoimmune system stuff. He said, it's like if you're in a relationship and the woman's in a relationship with, a man who's totally abusive, that's emotional stress. That's going to cause brain inflammation. Just like if you overworked and your body, or you had a head injury and now you have like a physical inflammation, but the emotional one is just as important. And so we talked about that, about herbs to get like, the different parts of the brain to start working again, and the different kinds of chemicals to start, building back up and or producing those chemicals again, like dopamine and serotonin and, things of that nature. So yeah, so it was super valuable. It's interesting to me because a lot of the things that I've been saying for 30 years, I'm now hearing other people say. And
Well, I
some of
think
them,
we undervalue the emotions in this completely. Like the emotions in the relationship to physical health. I mean, it just seems almost too obvious.
yeah, that's what I think. I think it's too obvious. But, the thing is like now it's like, I can start using herbs to help get the brain inflammation down. You know what I mean? In people. And, I do have a couple clients. I have one that had a traumatic brain injury, was hit by a diesel truck in their little car, was in a coma for like 2 months. A client of mine from a long time ago. And we've been working on minimizing, and working on that brain inflammation and stuff like that. And then I also have another, well, you know about it, but we won't talk about a lot on the radio show, but I have another person, a client that we're slowly rebuilding, and we're targeting the brain. It's amazing, like, and a lot of it is emotional work, you know what I mean? That's also a big part of the factor of them being able to kind of heal the things that have happened to them. So have you like
Well,
done,
I think
go ahead.
I was going to say, to like talk about the Western medicine practice, or like the Western doctors, like the MDs, and the frustrations for it. Like I totally get it, because I think it was about 3 years ago or something like that now, when I ended up in the ER with panic attacks. And it's like, in having anxiety and having gone through just, the stresses and having to deal with like the emotional stress of life. I got in a little bit like into an argument with the doctor. And then she finally came in, she came in and she sees me having a panic attack, and her her first go-to, I'm not a very large person adult or whatever, and come from Reno, and her first go-to is like treating me like I'm like some sort of drug addict. And so like the attitude there right off the bat was just frustrating, right? Or like emotion inducing. But then her immediate go-to was going for like the antidepressants or some sort of psych med, and then I get into the conversation with her about how absolutely not, with my background, like this is not an option, like not going to go there. And then she does like this thing where she goes like the eye roll, right? Like, oh well, I guess another option or something we can try is an anti-inflammatory, because anti-inflammatories have also been shown to do this. And we got into a little bit of discussion with like the science behind, and like that makes perfect sense. Like that makes more sense than taking something else that wouldn't work. And then in navigating herbal remedies for inflammation for the last 3 years or so, it hasn't been an issue. Like panic, like being able to navigate the emotional stuff is so much easier. It's just so much easier because there's not inflammation going on in the body that's throwing off the chemical system and making the body go into the fight or flight and survival mode. And when you're in that space and the chemicals are off, of course things are going to misfire. But if you add more chemicals to the mix, it doesn't make any sense. It just makes the most sense to let the body do its work by relieving the inflammation, because if you relieve the inflammation, the body can start healing itself.
Yeah. Well, yesterday we had this Dr. Mary Bove, unbelievable lady. I wish she was like my mother, my grandmother. I wish I like lived right next door to her and I learned all of the things she knows about herbal medicine and having like this amazing practice in her life. I don't know how old she is now, but she might be like 20 years older than me, maybe. But yeah, one of the things that we talked a lot about was that that if Americans do get like an alternative medicine, they have a tendency to it's got to be a constant detoxing, and it's got to be constantly cleansing, and I see this kind of in energy stuff too. Like, people, they get too busy about, smudging their house and trying to clean everything versus where they, focus their energy or the restoration part. And so she talked about that, like there's different phases, and in herbal medicine, we get that, like there's going to be herbs to help you, cleanse and detox, right? And then there's herbs that are going to, start to actually create the restorative processes. And then, there are herbs that, can do like multiple stages of things that you need them to do and not get so cleaning up everything. Like this is a pretty cool thing that I didn't really think about before. And one of the things she said was, fiber and people getting enough fiber, which, there's several different types of fiber. But one of the things she said is like in fiber, you're going to have more medicines, right? There's going to be more like herbal types of medicines, whether you've got flavonoids or antioxidants or any of this other kind of stuff, and how important this fiber is. And I think about even how many friends of mine that juice instead of just blend up, the whole piece of fruit. I mean, minus the skin or, seeds and stuff, but they don't really leave the fiber in there. And she said, the fiber is what the microbes in the gut need to chew on. It's what they're going to feed on. And it's the same thing when you make a garden bed. If for the microbes and the worms in that garden bed to create more, break down things into a more, positive, usable form, which also usually is a higher alkaline type soil, you have to keep putting stuff in there for them to digest and eat. So that was a correlation that I was actually missing, that the fiber is the same thing as the soil or the compost, that you would be adding your additives to. It's the fiber in your gut that keeps all those microbes happy, gives them something to eat, plus all those different fibers as they break down, because the microbial, mass, the biome is, chewing it down, that also releases a lot of those other types of medicines and nutrients to go into your system. So I was thinking a lot about, like how backwards, medicine has really become. And think about this, like, people in the, I think, in the I believe it was the Paleolithic period. So there's all this, like, crazy stuff about the paleo diet. And I can assure you that most of it is not even historically correct. And probably, most of it's not factually correct, because they didn't have olive oil in dinosaur times and Paleolithic times. And the whole thing about Paleolithic is that they believe, that they're trying to push a narrative about a meat-based diet. So that's about the time period where they say that, there was a split between, I believe, Neanderthal and Homo erectus, because Homo erectus started eating meat or something like that. Like, there's this whole kind of Darwinian, I don't know, kind of crazy history. But there's actually been, within the last 10 years, like, new scientific data that showed that people have gone back in, and the skulls and the teeth of people that they have, from Paleolithic period, they actually now have ways to look at DNA structures and the structures of things, so they can actually look at the genetics of the stuff that's still stuck between the teeth, right? So they can actually take a look at all that material and break it down and be able to put it in and do studies on it. Well, what they found was that these people ate grasses. So the reason why their teeth were, before they had this, hypothesis that they would have been eating meat and bones and stuff like that, because they did find, during that time frame, bones that looked like they'd been gnawed on by people, to release the marrow and stuff like that. But back then, you got to realize you're going to eat whatever you can find. I mean, that's kind of like how it was. So, but they found that a bulk of their diet were grasses. And I know from farming and doing farming studies, biodynamic and other reading literature, that, at one point in time in the Americas, we had grasses. I mean, buffalo grass was 25 feet high. So there was grass, that, level of grass. So during the Paleolithic time, you just pull it out of the ground and fold it up into a bundle and just chew on it. And it would have been highly nutritious, because, I mean, what do we have now? We cultivate wheatgrass, right? And, take a wheatgrass shot for, high absorption, high nutrient. But I think about, like, like, eating more food as medicine, but the problem is, like, some of it isn't being grown around here, and how that correlates not eating nature from nature, and how that is changing us to a more aggressive predatory species. And I'm not liberaling out. I'm just looking at actual data, that animals that, mammals that eat, more plant-based diets are more community, right, driven, and they're not kinder and nicer, that's kind of dumb, but they get along, and there's less aggression. Where you have predatory, animals that eat pretty much meat, and a lot of them don't even really care about their offspring. They abandon their offspring, or some of them, would eat their offspring if they're hungry. I mean, like, you look at reptiles. I mean, a snake will eat, its children. A snake will, you know what I mean? Snakes do lots of things like that. Eat their, competitors' eggs, and that's why, these bigger snakes they do a little bit better. Because they are so competitive. So you think about also, the other thing too is, like, emotionally, green leafy plants that are grown in the ground. Mind you, green leafy plants lose all their nutritional value in them after 3 days after they've been picked. But if you were growing them and you had nutritional density, in your land, and you're eating greens from your lands, they're also going to have amounts of DMT that are going to go into your body and your brain, which also, heavy amounts of DMT are linked to kind of, spiritual experiences. We could call them dream time, or dreaming medicines, or just something of that event. So there's also eating from the land, having this emotional relationship to the soil, emotional relationship to the plants, and then those plants having that relationship back to you, giving you that relationship back, and having all of those nutrients and chemicals and DMT and all these things that you actually need. So it's almost like, too, the further we get away from the land, and the further we get away from the soil, and the further we get away from actually eating food directly from the ground, kind of the less human we're becoming. And
What I think is funny is the
Go
picture
ahead.
that I keep having in my head is like with grass. Like if you're going to eat grass isn't going to run away from you. Like if you're looking to eat food. So it's not a stressful situation. Like you don't have to fight and kill in order to eat it. There's this like passive, like interrelational thing, right? Because there's the aspect where it plays in with the gut, and then I imagine with seeds and stuff, like droppings, passing on seeds, like there's a mutual benefit to plants being eaten. But with animals, right, like the emotional component to eating an animal is that either like it has to be hunted, but it's like there's a violent component to it, or we raise a lot of animals in cages and in these horrible farming, like animal farming situations, right, where like we're eating animals that have been abused and tortured, and then so we're bringing all of that energy into us as well. And then no wonder why people are so stressed out and aggressive and inflamed, and there's all this like, trauma cycling continuing, because that's the majority of the diet, right? Or if it's just all synthetic and chemical, of course it would play out to be something emotionally negative, maybe, right? I don't know if that's the right word for it, but aggressive and mean and ugly and all that gross stuff. But if you're eating plants, you're eating things where like the relationship is like chill and neutral and whatever, then there's not that energy within you that's within like the humans, right, that wants to destroy everything. That makes
Yeah,
sense to me.
in Ayurvedic medicine, a friend of mine was telling me he went to I don't know, like 30 years ago, he went to India, and he's white. I don't know, he's older now, but he lives in India, I think, these days. But one of the things he said was that when he was going to be living on this compound that had a guru, an Indian guru. And mind you, a lot of these real gurus, they're like very smart. And some of them have like 6 PhDs, speak multiple languages, have read the entire Vedas, which are like 400,000 years of oral history that was written down about India, like stuff that would blow your lid right off. Like you just, wouldn't be able to even imagine it. But he said, so he went to the school, cooking for Brahma, as he said, what it was, cooking for God or Brahma. And in the school, you have to do a lot of these emotional things, as well as, cooking these foods. And these foods, anyway, I understood these foods a lot better in this class, but he was saying that in Ayurvedic medicine, that it takes a lot of people in India are like 17th generation vegetarian, and that changes your, you have a different kind of DNA profile in the way that they understand it. He said that it takes up to 7 years of not eating any kind of animal fat or animal product for your body to actually finally shake out the memory and the memories of those animals that those animals had out of your tissues and your body, your physical body.
something else that stands out to me too that you mentioned is like when you grow your own food and you grow and eat the food like in the places that it's at, there's a much more harmonious like nutritional relationship going on. And it's just interesting that, especially with our American culture, where so much of our food comes from who knows and wherever, right? Like, and it's made with who knows and whatever, and like, again, like it's just, I think, highlighting and emphasizing that distance that we have between nature, like, and how far removed. Because I mean, we can even be eating vegetables and eating all like healthy food or whatever, but it's not ultimately healthy enough. Like there's still missing components, and like no wonder why people go towards like the meats and whatever else is available, right? Like you just eat. It almost feels primitive, like if you eat it if you find it, sort of thing. Like if we've been gnawing on bones trying to get marrow for a while, there's some sort of relationship value there as well. But I think, I don't know, like when it comes to meat and when it comes to eating those sort of like things, like there's just definitely a different level of having to connect with nature, that if we can't connect with nature and our food that way, I mean, it makes it impossible to connect with other people in that sort of way too. Not like you're going to eat people, but to have the understanding of the importance of life and how to respect another's life and what it means to take a life. And like so many people just don't understand what that means, and so they just do stupid shit all the time, and then like people just end up taking lives in very different ways, or passive ways, or not direct ways, or they take their own lives, and it's just such a bizarre phenomenon. Well, it is, but it isn't. I mean, it makes total sense of where it comes from. But people just don't want to look at it, and they don't want to do the work, and it just keeps perpetuating it.
Yeah, I had a big lesson. I think it was in 2010. I was interning on this farm in Mendocino area. I think it was 2010. And I was there for about 6 months, and I've talked about it before. It was we had 10 acres. It was like there in Fort Bragg, and then we ended up getting more acreage down the coast from like these really old bed and breakfasts and estates, where they had people, and we would start growing produce that was appropriate for that area. But we had like CSA boxes, and we slaughtered our own lamb and our own fryers. I kind of ended up being kind of in charge of the fryers, and they're kind of like dumb meat birds that grow really fast, and it's abusive if you don't kill them, right? So if you don't kill them, then about 6 weeks they're like 800-pound people, and they can't breathe, and their legs can't hold them up, and so they're made to slaughter for meat. And so raising them, and getting to know them, and even though they're not that intelligent, but just caring for them, and they come in a box, like this little teeny box, and you have these little baby chicks, that, and some of them are mutilated and broken and dead in the box, which is kind of hard to deal with. But then you raise them in a good environment. I raised mine in a super best environment that I could give them. They got sunshine. They went outside. They had like a pretty good life. But at the end, when I had to slaughter them, it was tough. We had to put them all into the back of this truck. And then, we went to the little slaughterhouse to slaughter them. And it's like, I know these guys, and one of the guys on our team got slaughter. We had to slaughter a 100, or we had about 85 of them, so in one day. So we had to like really be focused, and so the guy that was pulling them out of the truck, it just got a little rough on the birds, and he was using this thing to grab them and pull them forward, and then tie them up upside down, to slaughter them or whatever, beat them out or whatever. So I just was like, I want to get them out of the truck because I don't want them that upset. And I get that they have to be slaughtered, and I get that I took care of them, but I also I don't want them to be kind of abused towards the end because other people, are in a hurry. And so I would get in there and crawl in to get them and hold them, and they would just calm down. And then, I would put them into the slaughter cones and tie up their little feet, and then the guy would, bleed them out, and then we'd, I call it the salad shooter. You have to put them once you bleed them and they're dead, then you put them in hot water to help release some of the feathers, and then you put them in this spinner that takes off a lot of their feathers, but you can't leave them in there too long, otherwise it dislocates the joints and bruises the meat. And then you have to pluck off whatever's left, and then you cut off the legs and heads and you disembowel it. And then you put it in a bag, put it on ice, and you sell it. But I just remember, and I get, when people say to me, "Oh my God, I don't think I could kill and eat my animals," and you'd be surprised. I mean, there are probably some animals that I won't raise on my farm in the future, to slaughter. But, there will be some. There will be people that are going to need to eat meat. People have to have a choice of, food that's beneficial for them. You can't have them come and work really hard on your land and then expect them to eat, one way. Because I've been on communities that were like that. And I felt, literally starved to death, like in ashrams where there's no animal fats at all, and there's just plants, no dairy, no nothing, and you're just starving. I mean, starving, and you only get 3 meals a day, and you're doing like 4 hours, of Kundalini yoga and meditation and all of this stuff, every morning. I don't want people to feel work to death and not have enough to eat or variety of to eat. So, and I also want to make sure too that when I utilize the animals, or and we're going to slaughter them, then I'm ready to utilize every part of that animal. I want to be able to learn to tan hides, to make shoes and belts, and things that we could use on the land, and we could also sell to help support the land, and lots of different stuff. I want to be able to use it all, because I think if that's part of it. So everything that we didn't use on the chicken when we slaughtered them, it all went into compost. So it did actually help on the land. It wasn't a resource that we actually threw away. We saved it all. Yeah, so but yeah, it's
So I think one of my favorite ways to buy meat are from like the farmers markets, where you can pretty much get like the whole, like almost the whole chicken, right? Where it's pretty much been feathered and the head's chopped off, but the rest of the chicken's there. Like even that, like even in having to clean it out and then like chop off parts of it and then like take it apart even once it's dead, like that's even challenging. If you've like, but like, yeah, a lot different than picking up like a already filleted something or whatever, on a shelf that's been wrapped in plastic.
well, and think about how like elitist that really is. I mean, I'm
Right.
not going liberal on anybody tonight, but people might consider some of these ideas that I'm having on the liberal side. But it is, elitist, and being so far above something and not even really understanding it or having a relationship with it is, like people want to complain about how the government treats you. Well, you treat them meat that way. You don't really give a crap of where it came from or where it lived or what it breathed or what it ate. All you care about is that it's on your shelf. You have like zero relationship to it at all. The only relationship
Right. As
that
long as
meat
it looks
has is,
edible.
yeah, the only relationship that meat has is you buying it at the store and then you putting it on your barbecue. That's it. It wasn't even
Maybe
like,
seasoning it, but they make it too easy. They already season it these days. You just have to cut it out of the thing and it's ready.
yeah, well, yeah, there you go. It's all just ready made for you. But yeah, so hey, we're going to be going on a break here in probably about 30 seconds or something like that. But yeah, no, it's interesting. You know, consciousness is like a lot harder, I think, than people think. Being able
There's a lot of different layers to it.
Yeah, for sure. Consciousness is definitely something that takes a huge amount of work. At least for me.
Discipline too.
Yeah. Yeah, at least for me.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work because I have more programming that's unconscious than conscious. So, all right, we'll be back.
Yeah, okay.
5 minutes, we'll be back. Mute out. Hey, we're here at the second hour, carrying stones and digging holes to cultivate consciousness. Your hosts, Bridgette Dolgoff and Kelsey Sweet. Kelsey Sweet is on a remote location out in the Nevada desert.
It's cold and windy.
I bet you it's cold out there. I bet you it's freezing.
We're still on break. We're on a little doggy walk trying to get her tinkle, but it's like it's raining, lady. Put you back in the moon.
Kelsey's doing some spring camping. And so spring camping in Nevada is iffy. Sometimes you can have snow, sometimes rain, sometimes super high heat, sometimes freezing.
But I think it's such a fun time to go camping because everything's so pretty and everything's in bloom and not a whole lot of people are out yet. And it's almost my birthday, so I get to just celebrate myself. Yeah, you tell us.
Yeah.
People are walking close.
Yeah, no, my dog's the same way. My dog's like, you know what? You want some of this? All right. So, hey, we're at the second hour. And you can find out about everything Kelsey Sweet at kelseysweet.com. And my website is coe-llc.com. And then you can go there to the show name. There's a page and get all kinds of information there. Bios and blah, 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 blah. And all of that jive. Also, we are probably the last non-corporatized radio out there. Still First Amendment, you know, no matter how people feel here at Revolution Radio about different content or different hosts. So many people have so many different, talk about a diversity of points of view here at Revolution Radio. But because we're non-corporatized and we do believe in people being able to speak their minds and, you know, speak their truth and try to bring information out to the public. So we're probably one of the last networks out there that, you know, is still working at creating freedom and helping to educate people in all kinds of different ways. So we just ask you to help us keep the lights on. We all work here for free. We all volunteer our time. And so, yeah, just check on our website, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, periodically, see what our nut is. And, you know, help us to meet that monthly would be super great. We would appreciate it. All right. So anything else exciting going on?
I don't know. Yes, no. I've just been getting super into epoxies lately. That's been fun. Knobs, I got some new molds in for epoxies too. I got some little unicorns and pendants and what else they get? Like little beads. I think I got a cube and a little pyramid. And I got some like dye colors to mix in. And I gotta say, I'm one of those poor unfortunate fans of the Michael's Craft stores, especially when you sign up for like their gifts and discounts and stuff. Because this time of year, like they do like the 40% discounts, and online there's like the 20% discounts on top of that. And if you spend money, then you get like free money back. And so like I've just been hitting the jackpot with super, super cheap art supplies. So I've got like all this free time now. I wouldn't say like all this free time, but I've got like all those other responsibilities off my plate. So I have a lot more time now to make things, and I'm just super excited about it.
I know that's how I feel about everything starting to bloom. Medicine is starting to bloom out there. And I'm just so excited, to start kicking off this herb season and working so hard to get everything, finalized and getting these long courses done. Like this last week, well, last 3 days that I was in school, finished anthroposophy and then my spring herbal classes, spring conference classes. It's part of a 2-year curriculum, but it's the only curriculum I have right now. So it's like a relief, because I just recently got rid of 2 courses. So this one, once it's just monthly, I think there's like spring conference was pretty intense, but then there's a fall one. So mostly it's like once a month a class. So that's going to be super great. It's going to free me up to a lot of time so they can get out there. So what can you epoxy? Can you epoxy like fresh flowers?
Yeah, you can epoxy everything. You know what I epoxied yesterday or last night was, the little helicopter seeds from the trees or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We have a couple of different types of those little helicopter trees in the yard, and we have some that have like little tiny like pink and they're like little pink and green ones. And so I epoxied those into little like drawer knobs. I'm excited to see how those will turn out because they'll be set by the time I get home. But yeah, those were fun to put in. You can epoxy anything. One thing that I want to try, or that I've been watching a lot of videos and that I've seen a lot of that I like, are like the big epoxy like wood tables. Like if you find like a scrap of like river wood or whatever, parts of it that are filled in or gaps of it or like half of it that's done in epoxy with different types of water-like effects in it that I want to try. You can paint on it too, like in various layers. Like once it dries, you can paint over the top of it. Like if you're doing like a pond scene with a koi fish or something, like a top down, you can paint the different levels on various layers of epoxy, so you get a lot of depth in it as well. I would like to try it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I guess you could. So what do you just need? A mold? You pretty much need a mold and then find stuff to put in it and then epoxy it.
Silicone molds, and then like you can get like make your own silicone mold kits or whatever. So like if you have like a knickknack or something like that you really like, or like some sort of shape or like an angel trinket or something, you can stamp it into the molds and then like ultimately make your own molds too.
I want to do some flower pressing this year because I have those flower presses that I made with bamboo cutting boards of different sizes, and then these long screws, and then drilled the holes. So I've got my plant press. So I've got like 3 of them: a little one, medium, and a big one. But I think I want to like try to press some plants this year. I wish I would have pressed this mugwort that I used in my medic salve. It was like so incredible. And the flowers this mugwort had on it was like just mind blowing. But I'm not really sure what to do with them once I press them. I mean, but I think that they could be really cool pressed. I mean, there's some really cool like desert flowers, that will have kind of a bland, kind of a green color to it because it's deserty, but then it has like these crazy flowers on it with like, amazing, brilliant color. But, I don't know what I would do with them once I get them. I mean, I could create, I guess I could glue them and create like a crazy collage, and I could
make those out of them.
Yeah, you could like stick them on boxes and paint over them. What would you paint over them? Mod Podge?
Yeah, that's what I would use. Mod Podge would work really well.
But
You
that
could
would
do
be
all
kind of
kinds of
cool.
stuff with them. You could like, put them onto a board or whatever, frame
Yeah.
them. You could put them into bookmarks or like cards or something. That would
Oh,
be
that's
fun to
pretty
do.
cool. A bookmark. Yeah, that would be super cool, wouldn't it? You can give them out for
Yeah,
like
those are pretty easy
presents and
too.
stuff.
Yeah. There's some really nice paper out there too, like some like thick cardstock paper, and you can just put some like pressed flowers on them. I think that'd be really pretty.
Yeah, and then you could make
You
different
could
kinds
draw
of
on it, add glitter, sparkle. You could do all kinds of stuff with it. Yeah, just
cool.
leave them plain with flowers. It'd be beautiful.
Yeah, then I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna start collecting flowers and weird plant stuff and so that I could do that. That would be so great. You could make people like some journals, a little handmade journal,
Uh-huh.
put some flowers on the front of it.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
the craft stores or sometimes some of the 99-cent stores too have some really cool, just simple blank journals that are like easy to craft on too. So you can pick up like the little book super cheap and then Mod Podge some flowers on top.
That is cool. I'm kind of excited about that. Because then I
You
can
know
do
what mold
something.
I got? Well,
Hmm.
I haven't got it in the mail. I'm hoping it'll come in within the next couple of days, but it's one of my birthday presents to myself. But I got a mold for paint palette. I found one I think on Etsy for kind of cheap. So I can make a like epoxy resin paint palette. I think that would be cool. Because I've seen a couple of those that they've done with dried flowers in them where you can add different glitters and stuff. So that would be cool because it'd be functional. And different types of palettes.
Well, I'm excited. That'll give me some really cool stuff to collect. Because sometimes you'll be like, wow, those are such killer flowers, or that's an amazing plant, but you just don't know what to do with it. When I did
It's
my
something that, yeah.
I had to do that. I think I still have it in storage. Anyway, I had to do in my wild crafting herbal medicine course this summer of 2019. Part of getting your certification, there are lots of different things that you had to do, but um, the number one thing was make a plant press book, for going back and referring back to plants, because that's how they did it in the old days. If you wanted to learn about plant species, then you had to go out and collect them and then you make books of them and specimen kind of stuff. And I have that kind of a brain, like a super organized brain. So the project has to come together. And it was the last thing that I want to do. I was kind of angry over the plant press book. I know I talked about that before, but then in the end, I was so glad that I actually did it because it turned out super cool. But my whole thought was I wanted to go back to every plant in it was going to be a plant that I was using in that medicine program to actually make medicine from. So, but I also tied it in with the first plant in the book was the first plant I ever remember seeing or meeting in my life. And it's it's a crazy desert weed. And it's called devil's lettuce. And red ants just dig that stuff. When I was a kid, I used to watch the red ants just chow down on it when it would grow. And it had they have these really crazy shapes and they have these teeny little flowers on them. So I pressed one of those and it came out super awesome. And so that was my first plant. And then all the other plants that I put in the book were ones that I collected from making medicine. And so the whole thing turned out really good because it was a story, without any language, without any words. It was a visual story of my journey. So I really liked that. I really liked pressing those plants. And it had like, mugwort in it. It had mullein, lots of stuff that I made medicines from that summer. So it was a super cool book. And that year I made honeys. I made everybody, I got some local honey and then I made specialty honeys. I even made a poppy seed. I made a California poppy for pain honey. I made a rosebud from the wood roses around the area. I collect all the buds and stuff. And I made rose infused rosebud honey. I made, what else did I find? I can't remember what else. Anyway, so I made a whole bunch of people different honeys as gifts, right? Infused with cool stuff that you could put in your tea. You put your little California poppy honey, mix it into your tea or whatever else that you're going to have to help, take away pain. And California poppy is really good for your brain and healing. It's a nervine, so it helps to heal your nerves. And unlike opiates that you get addicted for, like heroin and stuff, California poppy actually has a lot of medicinal usage. But that was a really fun thing to do too, was to collect a lot of different plants, dry them, and then, grind them up in powder and then infuse them in honey. The rosebuds the flowers are really great. I just left them whole. And the way that they, floated in the honey and gave the honey just this beautiful like rose flavor. But yeah, I did, every year I do a lot of different stuff. Last year I didn't really do much because COVID really kind of effed things up. I just collected plants last year for making infused oils for salves, mostly pain salves. So, but I want to have some projects this year. I want to have some plant projects this year. And I'm thinking this whole pressing plants and flowers could be a really fun thing.
You know what I have for you if you want? Because if you want to make a book out of pressed flowers or like some big ones too, I have a bunch of wallpaper scrap books or like scrap wallpaper books or like the sample books. Like, like if you go to a store or whatever to like buy new wallpaper, they have like the sample booklets or whatever, different types of like wallpaper. I have a bunch of those from some of my old art classes that I'd gotten. And they make really cool collage books. I've got 3 of them going that I've just been like putting stuff into because they're heavy duty and some of them have handles and things to them. And they're big too, so you could use big flowers in them. So if you want to have one of those, you have.
Okay. Well, I'll probably check stuff out Wednesday when I come.
Yeah.
We'd be like, now, because
the arts and craft day. I'll show you all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah, no, I want to just do a lot of different stuff. I need to focus in on some fun, positive things that I'd love to do working with plants. It's my only sanity, I think. Like as herbal medicine and being able to go out and look at the plants and know when they're ready and stalk them and visit them until they say, okay, time to collect my medicine. But yeah, I'd live for it. I can't wait to live more of a mountainous life. So I might get the opportunity. So I'm hoping if I can get, this was my last big hurdle kind of standing in the way as far as time and timelines, was this spring semester for my medical herbalism school. So now it's going to free me up for a lot of stuff.
I think you'd really like epoxy too.
Yeah, no, I think I would really dig that too. So because I like to find things, like I'm thinking like, like little pieces of driftwood. And what I really like is I like to go through riverbeds that are dry, because you can find the killerest like roots that came out or parts of plants that have been like the water has corroded it away, and they're like weird shapes and super soft, and just stones and just weird things. Like I think I could really get into doing some really trippy, like full scale, like epoxy stuff, like a layering kind of a thing, which is different things.
I think so too.
But I might get the opportunity to actually, there's a herb company in Wyoming that I've been kind of sort of talking to. And so I want to go on a road trip to Wyoming, because that's ultimately where I want to buy land. And I'm going to do this biodynamic farm project. And then I'm going to do apprenticeships for combat veterans, or reskill them as, sustainable farmers. And I also want to grow plant medicines and save the seeds, and also have a seed bank, and then have a co-op. And then, do animals. I want to have a big enough piece of land that I can restore part of it for putting rehabilitated wild animals onto it as well. And then, but anyway, there's a lot going on. But I definitely want to live in Wyoming, and I definitely want to buy land up there. So this year, I'm actually thinking I might get to take a trip. So I contacted this herb company in Wyoming. I'm not going to say where, but and as soon as I get up there and visit, they said stop by, and they love to do wild crafting, but they're a company that grow herbs specifically for herbal products on the market, which is very exciting. And that a lot of them do wild crafting too. So I can go out with these people and see what's growing in Wyoming. So I was pretty excited about that. Yeah. I'm like, do you need help at your company? I could volunteer for a month just to learn something, So, and the other thing that really crossed my mind, in this medical herbal conference. So pretty much all doctors, and naturopaths that do medicine, we've talked about this before, a lot of them have never actually seen the medicine, right? They don't know what it is. So they may give it to their clients, like I was talking about before, a naturopathic doctor that had mullein weed growing out in front of their office and was talking about, needing the landscaping to come there to pull the weeds. But yet, she's using mullein in a blend for allergies and stuff like that and asthma. And she doesn't even know that that's what that plant is, and so was watching a video during the class course they were showing on the break about people growing herbs for small companies that specialize in giving herbs or selling herbal products to medical professionals, and about needing farms, small farms that could cultivate standardization, which means like you have to really watch the soil, you have to make sure you take that plant out at that time, blah 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 blah. And I'm just really interested in seeing what kind of a production that is, and how timely you have to dry all the plants so that they hold on to their stuff. So you may put them in like a greenhouse and have like a little wood stove on to dry them up faster, blah blah blah. But I'm interested in all that. And I think that as far as an herbalist, this is kind of like what crossed my mind during the classes I was taking, is I don't want to give people, like I'll recommend supplements and herbal supplements and things like that maybe like I'm not making. But my goal in life is to be able to have a big enough apothecary of natural herbs that I can collect wildly, or I can grow, that I can give people in all kinds of different medicinal forms, whether it's a powder, whether it's a fresh plant tincture, whether it's a powdered plant tincture, whether it's, this, whether it's that, whether it's a salve, whether it's, this kind of therapy, or a throat spray, or, whatever else, blah, 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 blah. So I realized, that I'm probably more of a cultivator. Like, where would I fit into the, budding herbal market where people are starting to kind of wake up, including, medical professional. And, I think I'm more kind of a hands-on person, like I want to make that medicine and give it out. So I think I'm kind of more of on the grower end, right? Or the collector end than I am the professional sitting in the office and having, a whole shelf full of things that I can choose to give to the patient, and wanting to have more of a hands-on. Because for me, it's really important to see, and that's one of the things the medical professional, one of them talked about on classes, were that, there has to be a standardization, because medical doctors, it has to work, really well all the time. So you can't just have different kinds of herbal products, but because of, soil when the plant was collected, how it was collected. A lot of these things play into how effective that medicine is going to be. And doctors need to be able to rely on it. Where, you go out, for example, let's just say in 2019, couldn't really find a whole lot of wild St. John's wort, which I collect, and my favorite way to use it is a oil infusion that I make a pain salve from, because it's unbelievable. It's like so shockingly good. It's just like a miracle. But in 2019, there was like none in my area. I had to go it with my class way up in the mountains to collect it. And then this last year, 2020, there was pockets of it that I could find, that I could collect, that were lower down, and they were like on the river. So you don't know from year to year where a lot of those seeds are going to blow into, where they're going to grow or they're not going to grow. And for me, like some of the places, they view St. John's wort as on the hit list, as far as states where they do ranching, because ranchers don't like their cows to eat it. And so the states, have gotten farmers to, ranchers pass laws to make it a noxious weed. When it's like, you could see how that could be the reason how they would want to eradicate it, because it's one of the best pain relievers there is. If you're going out and you're wild crafting, right? I mean, there's a lot of good pain relievers, but that one hands down is unbelievably like miraculous. So it's hard to find it, and it can be against the law, and you can't traffic it, across state lines. So going into California and harvesting it, I'd make medicine with it there, because bringing it over into another state like Nevada as a plant, or you want to plant it or whatever, is like a crime, when it's not even a poisonous plant. It's not even like a hallucinogen. Has nothing in it. But I want to know what those plants are doing. I want to have a relationship with the plants and how they're growing and how they feel, I guess. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of my friends. Once I'm working with a plant, it becomes kind of like a family member, you know? And look forward to actually seeing them in the summer. Well, I don't get to see that plant, but most of the time I get to see its offspring. And yeah, and how those plants have relationships with other things. Like, you remember when we were at the river and that dried bulb thingy that you touch? Remember? And I said, oh, that's teasel, when teasel dries. Well, they used to use those little comb bushy things that are on the top to comb hair, actually, and do all kinds of things. But when those bulbs, they get these beautiful purple flowers, like thousands, gazillions on that bulb. And these black bumblebees, the biggest bumblebees that are out there in nature, love that plant and love those flowers. And you'll see, usually you can see one or two bumblebees, but when you see them around these teasel plants, there might be like 5 of them, like trying to dive bomb it, to sit down on it, to feed off of it. And when you see that kind of stuff, you think to yourself, that's unusual. That plant has a lot of medicine, right? It has a lot of curative power, has a lot of mojo, has a lot of nutrition. For them to be able to collect very little amounts from that plant, and take back wherever they're going to take back. But yeah, so I'd love to see those kinds of relationships, because that to me is this like most people would be the MD going, okay, you should take this. They're like, okay, I'll take it. Me, it's like, oh, the bumblebees dig it. I'm going to take it. I'm going to figure out what this plant does. And it cures Lyme disease. The root of it actually cures Lyme disease. But it should be used very cautiously, right? So it's
an interesting looking plant. Well, like I didn't even see it bloom, just the dried version of it. It's so interesting looking.
Yeah, it has a presence, doesn't it? Even when it's dried.
Well, I was drawn to it. I think on our walk, it was one of the few, if only, plants that I was drawn to. I was like, ooh, and just had to touch it. That's cool. And teasel, right? How do you spell teasel?
I think it's T-E-A teasel E-L.
S-E-L, teasel.
And I wrote my
I
final
want to see the name.
paper on it. That's what I wrote when I did my wild crafting certification. Teasel's what I wrote my final paper on, because I learned a lot about that plant in the summer, and my class ended in fall, and the time that you harvest the root of those plants is in the fall. So, it was like watching that plant like the whole summer, learning about it from the dried stalk, seeing it in my teacher's garden, and then being able to find it and recognize it by it standing up dried. And so then being able to recognize it when it's growing. And the other thing too is that its leaves are edible, but the leaves are like armored. They have like these little kind of pokey things on the back. They remind me of like armament. I mean, the whole plant is is defensive, right? And so that tells you a lot of things about the plant, like it has this presence. Or in herbal medicine, some people call it the signature. What's the signature of it? And sometimes you can tell the signature from the smell. Sometimes you can tell the signature of the plant and what it's going to do by its parts and pieces. Sometimes you can tell by the other plants that are near it or not near it. Sometimes you can tell by what it looks like. It tells you exactly what it is and what it does. It's kind of an interesting thing, but it has this very defensive signature to it. And it's definitely really interesting being, for sure. But it'll be cool because I don't know, I think I'll just have to watch them. What I'll do is I'll go out there and I'll watch them, their timeline. But I'll take you back out there, out to this other area where there's usually a big patch of teasel that grows. And then and they're like a biannual too, right? So biannual is that they have two things. So mulleins a biannual, a thistle is a biannual. Because what they do is they grow their original leaves, their root and their leaves, and then when the next spring comes, then they digest a little bit of the root and some of the nutrient, and they shoot a stalk up the second year, and then they produce a flower and then offspring, like a seed. So a lot of times those biannual plants usually have lots of different types of medicine. Usually the root medicine's usually good the first year before it grows a stalk. Then, maybe, and also the leaves. And then the next year, the leaves and the, flowers would be good for something. And then, kind of like that. So usually we'll have like a multi-purpose medical usage. But once it gets going, the teasel, then, and I can, figure out areas where there's going to be quite a bit of it. Then as soon as it starts to flower its little bulb, I'll be like, okay, let's go to the river so you can watch it and take a look at how cool that it really is. It's just like, you can't take your eyes off of it. And just the bee activity, the bee and wasp activity is just incredible. Like it has like it's emitting some kind of like frequency, it's attracting those types of insects. It's incredible.
It's pretty tall too.
Yeah, some of them I've seen.
If I remember correctly, it's a good couple of feet.
Yeah, some of them have gotten like eye level in a couple of the places that I've gone. So they can grow pretty big and have like, well, anyway, it'll be interesting. But the other thing too about the leaf has a lot of defense in it. It's like, it reminds me of a shield, with like some pokey things on it. But you can eat those kinds of things, even nettles. And what you do is you turn the pokey parts in on themselves and then fold it up, and then you chew it. And once you start to chew it, then it kind of breaks down a lot of the issues that you would have from the pokey parts. But the one thing that is really amazing is if you really like the teasel, because I want to make you a bitters, right? Because this class reminded me how important bitters are, all different kinds of bitters that our bodies really, really need. Because if we're not taking the bitters, this is kind of like the philosophy. If we're not taking in the bitters into our diet, then our gallbladder and liver can't really release bitter. They can't release the emotion of bitter. They can't balance out bitter. And then this plays into like, you know, a lot of functions in the body by not getting this bitter. And 30, they said that there's 30 receptors in the body for bitter, and how essential it is and how we don't have it in our diet. And I had a whole wildcrafting class about like why people keep having their gallbladders removed. It's because they just are not getting the bitter in to deal with the bitter that's in there, right? So the bitters can help to do so many different things in our digestion and just everything. I mean, just unbelievable. I learned so much more about the effects of bitter in this course. So I think I could make you a yarrow teasel leaf bitters. That would be super amazing. So that's what I'm going to make you for your bitters. Yeah, and then you can take a little bit of it, you know, for 6 months before you eat. And it'll just really help you, you know, help with so many different things. That's the cool thing about plants is like it works on the emotional level. Like sometimes we choose herbalists, you know. Yeah. And my one teacher, she was talking about it, how when she was young, when she was an early herbalist, she made like, you know, would make several different kinds of bitters, maybe like 10 different types of bitters with different kinds of, you know, medicinal plants, because emotionally, you know, she would jive with one, maybe not jive with this other one, and taking in all those different types of medicine just because they fall into the same category as a bitter, but they also each have all these different properties. And she said you can kind of build to suit the bitters. Like, for example, you know, if you have people that are prone to, say, urinary tract infection, you could do a yarrow bitter, and you could add, you know, maybe even some other types of plants, like, you know, that would offer those types of bitter chemicals that go into the body and help. So you could actually add different kinds of bitters and make them built to suit. So if the people have several different problems and you have all these different bitters, well, they also will have different outcomes, right, of the type of bitters that they produce and other things that they work on. So I was thinking, wow, that's so great. And also it's really good to, you know, help the bitters go into the body and just help with a lot of different um you know, hormonal stuff, and they help to just deal with a lot of digestive stuff, changing the cooling and heating effects of your digestion, which, you know, in Ayurvedic medicine, that's what the food is based on. And you know what?
I was going to say Chinese medicine uses like the cooling and heat system too, don't they, within their system?
Yeah, they use a lot of that kind of stuff. But the one thing that we're India like is different, the Ayurvedic, is that they actually have dishes of food that are like thousands of years old because of the combinations. They actually drive in medicines deeper. Say, for example, like I learned this over the weekend too, is that you can say take a turmeric or a curcumin, which is like one of the best anti-inflammatory things. I mean, across the board for everything. I mean, we should all be chowing. I mean, I knew this before, but like now it's just crazy. Like I'm just going to be making all kinds of things out of turmeric, but the curry is designed with other spices in it to actually drive some of these other herbal plants deeper into the body. So say, for example, you have some curry, you have a turmeric, right? You just using the turmeric to eat. Well, yeah, you're going to get a lot of anti-inflammatory help and aid from it. But if you add it with like black pepper, I forget what the other, even some ghee, and there was something else that they said were drivers of taking the medicine deeper and into the nano levels. I was like, wow, you know, this is so incredible, because Ayurvedic was using nano medicine, you know, in a good way, naturally, you know, thousands of years ago, they got this and how to use.
So good too.
Oh my God, I know. when you walk away from Indian food, you're like, oh, I needed like a nap under a tree. I'm so happy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was kind of cool and plus I had that friend who was teaching me for a while, like several years ago, on how to make some of these Brahma. He went to Brahma, to learn to cook for God in India. And they teach you a lot of these dishes that are old and old and old. And the reason why they keep eating them is because the way that they're combined is driving medicines deeper into your body, right? So eating the food and the spices that drive and heal your body, all these things going deep into your system, the nutrient and everything. So now I understand why you use some of these things and why you would use ghee as a driving force, because of the type of fat it is. It can take stuff deeper into your system to the nano layers. But yeah, it was, um, that's another thing that we really need to think about, like not only eating good food from the land directly with the sunlight and the water intact in it and the nutrient, but also eating it in better combinations so they can drive each other, deeper into us to help us to heal, like you were talking about before, heal the conflict that's in, taking their
Mm-hmm.
sunlight and their structured water and their infrared and all these different light rays into our bodies and actually bringing that medicine to the inside. I mean, I don't think there's anything healthier. People talk about structured water and they talk about all this other stuff, and how important sunlight is. Well, then why aren't you eating food? Because food that you grow in your yard is the closest to all of that stuff that you can get.
The light part of it, I think, is cool too. I think light therapies are really interesting, like
Well,
different
that's
color
what,
therapies and how they address the deep cellular, the
well,
nano
that,
aspect of it.
yeah, that's what chlorophyll is. It's liquid sunlight, basically, that's green from the plant, but it's basically liquid sunlight because the plant takes it in,
Taking
right?
light.
The
Mm-hmm.
photosynthesis, right? And converts the light into itself, right? So you'd be like eating light if you can get those plants in. And I'll tell you what, there's nothing like going out into the land to cook yourself dinner and grabbing a giant head of lettuce that you're growing, and cut into that, and then all the other vegetables and stuff, and make like this huge salad and eat it, and just how different it is getting something fresh from the ground and just the
I
experience of
like to
eating it.
think too. Yeah, I like to think too, just the how much of, well, 'cause you mentioned water stuff earlier too, and how much of our bodies are water. And then it's amazing what happens when you add light to water, because you get just amazing refraction. So if you just imagine light going into your body and refracting up all the water in your body, what kind of energy that would unleash.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so
Vegetables
much
are
like, yeah, there's
water.
so much far infrared like
Good.
in the sun. So that kind of stuff going into the plants, the Dr. Pollock that wrote the book Fourth Phase of Water talked about structured water and how important infrared was a component to the structured water. And he showed veins and arteries and videos of studies that he did where they would put people in infrared sauna, or they would, um, add infrared light to water or let it sit out in the sunlight. And they did all kinds of, of those kinds of different studies. And what they showed was that as far as healing inflammation in the body, that the infrared spectrum was like a miracle. And what it would do is it would take the coagulation, so kind of the rough edges that are created because of inflammation, kind of like nicks and pockets along the veins and arteries, which is the early onset of all cardiac disease, basically. So once all those pockets and stuff start getting into those artery and venous walls, then everything starts to stick and coagulate, and then nothing gets where it needs to go. But if you add in infrared light, that you can't see, that's invisible, whether it's infrared sauna or through structuring the water, or different kinds of methods, what they showed was that the inside of the veins and arteries became super smooth and kind of lubricated, and then everything passed in the center, at high speed back and forth, whether it was the good stuff going directly where it needed to go, or the bad stuff coming out. There was a direct line. So they showed like how important, infrared spectrum of sunlight is to the human body, that it can actually radically cure inflammation, especially, blood type of inflammation and the clogging, which is, all strokes, all heart attacks, all heart disease, exhaustion, lack of oxygen, is part of, all the things that we kind of face with Alzheimer, mental disorders. One doctor was talking about, I forget which brain chemical he was talking about, which there was like, that was showed up with Parkinson's, so this whole neurological aspect of, another type of inflammation, because inflammation, no matter where it's hitting in the body, that's the start of all disease. And it may look like a different disease because that's what they've set it up to be. They confuse you by languaging, but it's all like the same thing. It all has the same basis. And most every plant, this is the other thing too that I learned a couple summers ago wildcrafting. Every plant that I could find out in nature had something to do with inflammation. Whether it was a urinary tract infection, that's an inflammation. It's interesting how bronchitis, a lot of these things, those are not any reason to give people antibiotics. Those are things that you want to like get rid of the inflammation, because once you get rid of the inflammation, then everything's going to flow freely, right? So in our society, we get a lot of antibiotics, and which can make the problem actually turn into like a worse problem. So it's interesting to me, like how much plants actually want to help us. And you know what else is mind-blowing about plants? You'll have one plant that, is a plant that has a bad attitude or has a chemical for a certain reason, right? Because it likes to keep things away from it. So say, for example, poison oak. But there are plants that will grow around poison oak that actually can cure the poison oak. And also the mud and dirt that grows underneath poison oak actually will also have the curative to poison oak. So if you end up getting poison oak on you, you can actually dig underneath in the dirt, add some water to it, and put that immediately onto the area that's been exposed to the poison oak, and leave poison oak remedy in it. And so that's the other thing about plants, is like plants are conscious, they take personal responsibility, and they work in a community where it's like the yin and yang. This one will give you a rash and make you itch, but the one next to it will make it better. I mean, how cool that kind of a community situation is.
I really like the colors of plants.
Me too. Me too.
I think that's what I'm drawn to the most, is just color. And I think it's funny too, because what comes up a lot in readings.
No, you're not a color person. You're like a texture. Color. I think you're a texture person.
Texture too.
You're always going after texture.
Especially the way I blend and layer color. I like just bright, vibrant color. But I like to prescribe color to people too. Like if I'm doing readings or something comes up or like chakra stuff, like plants, like if it's root chakra stuff, like red foods, or like paying attention to orange foods and the energy of yellow foods and green foods and blue foods and purple foods, and how that impacts the body, and just how those different colors in our environment stimulate everything. I mean, even to our clothes. I even tell people to add in like different, or add in certain colors or something like that if it's missing out of their energy field, just because the vibrations play into the space. The color is just amazing. And then, my dad was showing me some pictures of like flowers from his garden back home, and it just made me think of like the community, right? And just the number of types of plants that grow together, and just the types of colors and the varieties. I mean, it's absolutely stunning. Just the, like, nature's design and how all the bits and pieces are put together. I mean, fascinating. And then how the flowers and the plants are designed around the insects, and how the insects are designed around the flowers, like your poem. They all interact in different ways, and how the bees are made to interact with the flowers, and how the flowers interact with the bees, and how the bees can see different colors in the flowers that we can't see too, in different patterns. Oh, it's mind-blowing. Just the subtle details and all the basic nature around us. Amazing.
Yeah. I like to smoke a joint. I like to get out of my car with, I have a 5-gallon, Home Depot bucket with a lid, and I put all my stuff in there because I can actually sit on it if I need to. I could put my lunch in there. I could put all my herb collection gear in there, blah, 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 blah. Anything that I need, I can put in there, and whatever Jen needs to. And I just carry the bucket, but I just can't wait. I put on my gear, put on my hiking boots, and I hop out of the car and put my little hat on and smoke a joint and grab my bucket and walk out into nature to see what's going on. And last summer I did a lot of it because there wasn't anything else going on and you couldn't really go anywhere else. So I was like, well, I'll just go to nature. And I was, at the end of the day when I was done, I would just like take off my hiking boots and I would flop out and just float in the river for a while, looking out the clouds, because I was just totally blissed out. Just totally blissed. Like, oh, look at that plant. Oh, look what that one's up to. Oh, yeah. This year I hope to we have fake Solomon seal here. So I'm hoping to maybe do something with that this year. I usually am never ready for it when it comes. So definitely going to do a lot more with yarrow this year. I'm going to make some bitters from the yarrow. And yeah, no, I can't wait. I just can't wait. And, even when we were out there at the river, that sagebrush was so dynamic already. And usually it's like thin and sparse. And this year it's just really vibrant. And so I definitely want to collect some of that and definitely make an oil from it so that I can, because it's also like sage can be an anticoagulant. So if you cut yourself or whatever else, it can stop bleeding. So it's really nice to have like in a salve, like a medical salve with a lot of other things in there that can help your body to heal. And then you can throw those salves like in your backpack or in your cabinet and you have them, ready to use. I mean, sometimes it's nice to have a little anticoagulant in some form, because otherwise you can't stop the bleeding unless you go to the hospital. And say, for example, last several years ago, I learned this philosophy about making what they call a medical ghee. And in India, they make it out of ghee, which is clarified butter. But I, this last year, made a medical oil inspired by Ayurvedic medicine and medical ghee. But I used a really good, like, cold press organic olive oil, and then I infused all my plants in it. And I made it specifically for sinuses and those kinds of things, right? To kill viral agents and all this other stuff for burns and everything else. So medicated ghee you actually put in your eyes for different things. You put it in your ears, and you also snort it in your nose, like a few drops, and it can go on to the membrane back there in your sinuses. It actually can heal scar tissue. It can actually heal sores and wounds and clear up infection. But think about if you had a nosebleed, how great it would be to have a medical oil that was made out and some, native anticoagulants that you could sniff it in there and then hold your nose and allow it to do its job. I mean, and then you won't have to go, if it's a mild nosebleed, then you wouldn't have to go get it cauterized. So, think about that.
Speaking of clouds, we wrap it up because I think we have a minute. The clouds right now, Bridgette, are fantastic.
I know. I'm going out to look at them.
The sunset is
It was
gorgeous
last night too. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. Have a great week.
The
Adios.
clouds are so pretty. I love color.